about to see a short film on cable laying. This particular film is devoted to the use of the mechanical layer number 1, and it is intended to give you a basic idea of the type of work it tackles. In all cable work, it is of paramount importance to work to a drill or method of working. For the sake of clarity in this picture, each man in the laying party has been given a number, and you must watch carefully the duties of each number. The detachment is lined up with its commander, standing in front with his motorcycle, and behind him are the 30-hundredweight lorry containing the mechanical layer number 1 and two 1500-weight trucks for the building parties. This is the actual laying party, consisting of numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the driver of the truck. Here is the layer mounted in the lorry. The layer is independent of the lorry and can be very easily removed from one vehicle to another. The main features of the layer are that it is driven by a small four-stroke engine, one of the advantages being that it imposes no fatigue on the personnel working it. The drums can be changed easily and quickly. Cylinder head, flexible exhaust pipe, driving wheel, driving belt, and the secondary driving wheel. The clutch pedal, the clutch release rod, and the brake. The clutch pedal, when depressed, also operates the brake and stops the drum rotating. The control wheel, which tightens or loosens the driving belt, thereby rotating the layer head and pulling the cable off the drum, throwing it over the side of the lorry. The cable being threaded into the layer head, it is passed through the rollers, leaving a loop, which is then pulled between the rollers by pressing the lever. The cable can be laid from each side of the vehicle, or if necessary, over the tailboard. Number 2 is shown taking up the tension of the driving belt to the layer head. The layer head rotates the moment the belt is tightened and commences to throw out the cable. Now you will see how simple it is in the event of a breakdown of the 30-hundredweight lorry to remove the layer from one vehicle to another. In this procedure, all 4 working numbers and the driver of the vehicle take part. At each 4 corners of the layer base is a worm-driven clamp, which when tightened has the effect of holding the layer firmly in the position in the vehicle. The layer has been specially designed to fit into a 30-hundredweight WD 6-wheeler, and as you see, can be interchanged in a very short space of time. Come on, chaps, jump to it. It isn't as heavy as all that. You have had all the parts of the layer explained to you. From now on, note particularly the work that each man of the laying party has to do, as it is essential for speedy and successful cable laying that everybody knows his own job. Once again, we have the building detachment lined up. The layer is on the far side of the picture. The other 2 vehicles are the building party trucks, carrying all necessary stores for the building up of the line. They leapfrog one another and so keep up with the layer. Party, attend, ha! Now the working numbers. Number 1 is the NCO in charge, and he takes up his position in front of the lorry. He controls the vehicle by the blast of his whistle. It is he who decides when a crossing is to be made, and also what type of crossing. Number 2's job is to control the layer. He takes his place in the bucket seat and looks to number 1 for orders. Number 3 stands in the cage, and his job is to guide the cable as it leaves the layer into the required position with the handle of a crooked stick. Number 4 sits beside the driver and watches the front for signals from the detachment commander, and will take his part in constructing crossings. He is responsible for labeling the lines. There are 2 building parties. Both are identical, and each consists of 2 linemen, one of whom may be a lance corporal and the driver of the 1500-weight truck. Each truck carries a drum barrow, 4 miles of D8 cable, and the necessary stores. Now you're going to see an actual demonstration. Let's see the layer in action. The scene starts with the lines officer receiving instructions over the telephone from his CO, and in turn issuing his own orders to his section officer.
Yes. Yes, speaking. Right. Fetch Mr. Collins. The CO wants a line laid from div to rear div at 198641. The line to be through by 1900 hours tonight. Take your section and carry on.
The section officer, having received his orders, sends the detachment to a rendezvous, whilst he himself makes his own reconnaissance. The detachment then moves off under its detachment commander, the section officer having gone on ahead. Here he is. Careful reconnaissance of a route is most important in all forms of cable laying, and the most obvious route is not always the best. For instance, in this particular case, the section officer arrives at a crossroads, and it would appear that to use the telegraph poles on the opposite side of the road would be the obvious route to take. He notices, however, that the crutch stays of the poles would necessitate cutting the cable, and therefore decides to lay the line in the bushes on the left-hand side of the road. The detachment is now arriving at the rendezvous, which has been carefully chosen in order to afford the maximum cover from the air. Note particularly how all the vehicles drive immediately well under cover. The men are then allowed to fall out and stand by their vehicles, awaiting the arrival of the section officer.
Good morning, Sergeant. Will you stand a minute at ease, please?
Cadet! Aye!
Right. We're going to lay from advanced div here, up this road, left branch, left turn there to rear div. 4.5 miles of cable. Any questions?
No, sir.
Right.
Polly! Prepare for work!
The detachment have now received their orders to prepare for work. They mount the vehicle and remove their equipment.
Detachment ready to move off, sir.
Very well, Sergeant. Carry on, please.
Move off!
The detachment move off to the starting point from which the line is to be laid. The orders having been given, we're going to see the actual laying of the line, commencing with the detachment lining up at the starting point. You will notice that before they move off, number 4 takes the end of the line from number 3 and makes fast to the nearest tree. The end of the line is subsequently connected to the terminal box by one of the outdoor linemen from the signal office. Note particularly how number 3 pays out some 30 or 40 yards of slack line before the vehicle moves off. Here is the outdoor lineman from the signal office, connecting the end of the line to the terminal box. From now on, it is concentrated teamwork. Every man must be right on his toes so that orders are carried out automatically. The layer is well on its way and is throwing the cable well off the road in amongst the bushes. Note number 3 is constantly guiding the actual direction of the cable as it leaves the head. This is necessary, as he must watch the varying countryside over which the cable is being laid so that he can guide the cable into or over the trees and hedges as he thinks fit. To lay a line really well, it is important to synchronize the speed of the layer with the road speed of the vehicle. If this is not done, it will either result in the line being laid in festoons, or the line will be far too tight and might pull out into the center of the road, or form a tripwire. It should be like this. The laying party now arrive at their first pole crossing. The detachment commander is already waiting. The lorry halts at the far side of the crossing, paying out 20 or 30 yards of slack before the layer is stopped. Whilst number 2 is paying out the slack, numbers 3 and 4 jump down from the lorry and receive from number 1 the tools and stores with which to construct the crossing. Numbers 3 and 4 jump the holes on each side and well back from the road. Whilst 3 and 4 are jumping the holes, number 1 takes a pole, peg and guy line to the side farthest from the lorry, and we now see him joining the 2 sections of the pole. Number 2 holds the pole between his legs so that the top is immediately above the hole in which it is to be placed. He then attaches the cable to the top of the pole by means of a clove hitch. And attaches the guide to the top of the pole. When this is done, he shouts up. Both he and number 1, who has been doing the same job on the other side of the crossing, raise the poles simultaneously. As they raise the poles, they slide their hands down the pole, keeping a hold on both the cable and the guy line. After the poles are placed in the holes, number 1 directs numbers 3 and 4 in the adjustment of the guys. When the guys are finally made off, number 4 makes a neat coil of slack, which he attaches with a clove hitch to the bottom of the pole, finally labeling the line. As a matter of interest, that crossing took 1 minute 25 seconds. And now that it's done, the men double back to the lorry, replace their tools and stores, and move off. But they don't get very far. They've come to the end of the first drum, so now let's see them change it. In the meantime, numbers 2 and 3 take one of the fully loaded drums and put it onto the layer. The actual changing of the drum is the job of numbers 2 and 3, who as soon as they have taken it off the layer, hand it to number 4, who takes it to the end of the cable on the side of the road. Number 2 must be particularly careful to see that the retaining nut on the spindle is screwed well home. Otherwise, the drum might quite easily work loose. Number 4, having carried the drum over to the end of the cable, is now attaching the old cable by means of a clove hitch to the handle of the old drum. He also labels the line. Number 1 now brings his telephone and tests back on the line.
Layer party calling. Testing first drum. Are you receiving my signals okay?
As soon as he has found this satisfactory, number 4 attaches the new line to the other side of the drum, also with a clove hitch, and proceeds to join up by tying a reef knot with the 2 cables, which he then closes with his pliers. finally pulling the knot tight. Having severed one of the loose ends, he proceeds to separate the copper conductor from the steel strands by bending all strands of the cable. The steel strands will spring back, leaving the copper strand still bent. He then uses the copper conductor as a binder. After which he proceeds to finish the join by binding it with insulating tape. When this is completed, the empty drum is placed in an inconspicuous position in the nearby bushes. The drum being changed, the line tested, and the joint made, we're off again. The layer is now coming to another by-road, where an overhead crossing is again necessary. On this occasion, there are 2 trees conveniently placed at either side of the road. A natural method of crossing is always preferable. As before, the lorry stops on the far side of the crossing. Once again, number 2 pays out 20 to 30 yards of spare. Number 4 then takes the long crooked stick and proceeds to place the cable in the trees. Numbers 2 and 3 then tie back the coils of slack to the bottom of the trees on each side and label the line. It is not always necessary to make an overhead crossing. And in fact, where the ground is soft, a buried crossing is quicker. And on all tracks, this type of crossing is best. The layer is now approaching a point where another crossing is necessary. And this time it's a buried crossing. Number 4 gets his mattock from the lorry, and under the orders of number 1, starts cutting the trench on the far side of the road, at least a yard beyond the side of the track. When this is done, number 3 clears the earth out of the trench with a spade before placing the cable in the trench. Meanwhile, number 4 drives in a peg on each side of the trench. Note particularly the angle at which these pegs are driven in. With the pegs in at this angle, should the tension suddenly be placed on the cable, it will tend to drive the pegs further into the ground instead of pulling them out. Number 4 ties back the coil slack to the pegs and labels the line. Number 3 fills in the trench and puns the earth round the cable. Number 1 satisfies himself that the crossing is satisfactory before giving orders to move off. We are now at the end of the line. Number 1 tests it before fastening it onto the terminal box.
Layer party calling. Line completed. Are you receiving my signals okay?
He then connects it to the box, labels the line, and pencils in the connections of the line on the inside of the terminal box lid. Actually, the connecting of the line to the terminal box would be done by the outdoor lineman of the signal office. When the unit moves on and the line is no longer required, the reeling in of the cable takes place. First come the 2 building parties, leapfrogging each other. Their function is to go ahead clearing the line so as to leave as little work as possible for the actual reeling in party. As before, the same working numbers work the layer, and in this case, they are reeling in over the tailboard of the lorry. Number 2 watches the loop carefully, keeping it about 15 yards behind the lorry, and he must be ready to halt the lorry immediately should it be caught up. Number 3 is standing in the cage, wearing a leather apron and handguard, and guiding the cable evenly on the drums. And that is all we have time to show you in this introductory picture on cable laying. The job completed, there is only one thing now for the men to do. I thought so. Good health, chaps. You earned it.